All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Lou Bryson and Liz Rhoades, plus special guest Murphy Quint of Cedar Ridge Winery and Distillery. I'm going to let your host give a more formal introduction to him in just a moment. But real quick, before I turn things over, I'm Will Hookinga from Savvy.co. And as always, just want to point out a few ways you can interact with each other, with your hosts and their guests throughout the course of the show today. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. It's always great to see that. If you have a question at any point during the show, there's another little button at the bottom of the screen that says Ask a Question. So just click that button, send your question in, and I will relay that over to your hosts. And last but not least, feel free to invite anyone you know to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But yeah, with that out of the way, Liz, Lou, the floor is yours now.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will. Wow. So did everyone just enjoy that new intro?
I am so pumped now.
I'm living my best life right now. Awesome. So for those of you just joining our show for the first time, this is actually our very last guest. So our show, this is episode 99, and our little show will be ending next week, just with a recap on episode 100. So we're very excited to host Murphy Quint from Cedar Ridge. I see some hellos out in the audience.
Yeah. Hey, Frank.
Hey, guys. Anywho, I'll kick it off. So, hey, everyone. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage. Actually, I just celebrated my 15th year.
All right.
I spent my career across many different spirit types, product types, internationally, beer, rum, vodka, CBD, RTD. But hello, my particular favorite and expertise is, yes, in whiskey.
Admit it.
Spent most of my career at a tiny little mom and pop shop known as Diageo, but am now currently head of whiskey development at Whistlepick Whiskey. And I am super excited today because farm distillery to farm distillery, this is what we're going to dig into today. So brace yourselves. That's what we have going on today. And I also run a little side gig called Spirit Safe Consulting. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I have going on. Lou?
Excellent. I am Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. I am, for this special episode, I am broadcasting from inside a covered bridge. I spent 20 years as the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine, and I'm currently best known as the author of Tasting Whiskey and Whiskey Masterclass. There we go. What am I drinking today? For our next to last show, what else am I drinking but a bunch of Cedar Ridge? And thank you, Murphy and company, for sending the samples. We have, and Liz, you'll be joining me. Is that right? You have samples? Did you get samples?
I did not.
Oh dear. Okay. Sorry to have brought that up. I feel like Marty. I have the Cedar Ridge Bottled and Bond Bourbon. There is the Cedar Ridge Port Cask Finished Straight Rye, and the quintessential single malt. So I'll be sampling those. What it is, I'm afraid. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the label, though. It's their pun, not mine.
Oh, we'll dive into that one because there's a whole story behind that. Yeah.
So that's where I am. Liz, back to you. Please bring Murphy in.
Amazing. So super excited, like I said. Murphy Quint, Cedar Ridge, a huge fan. So thank you for that. Farm Distillery. He's been in the business since 2005, which, fun fact, is the year I graduated high school.
And now we know.
Now we know. We've been just chatting in the green room that Swisher, Iowa, right?
Yep.
For those of you who don't know, Midwest, right? People talk about coasts, but West Coast is the best coast, but I just say Midwest is the best. So I actually also grew up in the Midwest, and I Google searched this. We grew up, and I grew up 4 hours from where he's at. So corn is super important to my ethos, and maybe that's the reason why we're both in this mess together, right? That we're
Absolutely.
both making whiskeys. So super excited to have you on as our last guest. Murphy, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm super, super honored to be here with you guys as the last guest. And I should mention real quick, I am operating with a little bit of a head cold, so hopefully my voice cooperates with me through this. But yeah, very excited to be here with you both.
Don't worry, if it fails you, we'll just start making shit up. It'll all be good.
Yeah, there you
go. So Murphy, what we normally like to kick off the show with is, how did you get to where you are? Bring us along on the journey.
How does anyone get to where they're going? It kind of just a wild ride, like pretty much everyone else in this industry. And I'll say that is one of my favorite things about this industry, is that almost no one was like, hey, I'm going to set out to pursue a career, in making whiskey. It's something that always kind of just pops up and happens. And I will say, Liz, from the sounds of it and from what I've researched on you, we have fairly similar backgrounds. I graduated in 2006 and kind of ended up in this industry the same way that you did here. But I'm currently on my second stint with Cedar Ridge. Cedar Ridge, I should mention, is my family business. My parents started it back in 2005. And the two stints that I've done here are dramatically different than one another. To kind of give you an idea of where we're at now, we're a fairly sizable distillery located in Swisher, Iowa. Right now, we're barreling about 200 barrels every single month. That's our average. In the world of craft, that's actually fairly sizable to be putting away 200 barrels every single month. So we've got a pretty aggressive setup. We're cranking whiskey 24 hours a day, 6 days a week right now. Next week, we'll probably get to 7 days a week. So we're going around the clock. But if you back up and get to when I started back in 2005, like I said, this was a family business with a completely different business plan, completely different business model and vision. And we were a literal garage winery and distillery. To kind of draw you a better picture, we were, like I said, in a literal garage, but mainly a winery that was differentiating our winery by also being a distillery. So, at that point in time, back in 2005, there were a number of Iowa wineries. And it's like, well, why would you come to ours? Well, we're also putting out this vodka and gin and rum and a little bit of whiskey. So, you can try those while you're at our tasting room. And that was kind of our differentiator to hang our hat on. And as time went on, we kind of started following consumer trends a little bit more. And then we had one light bulb moment that I'm sure we're going to harp on a lot today. And that's that, hey, wait, we're in the middle of corn country. We're in the state of Iowa, and bourbon by law has to be made from at least 51% corn. Yet no one in the state is producing bourbon. Like that's madness. Why wouldn't we be going heavy on bourbon? So just that one light bulb moment that my dad had a number of years ago, that really changed the direction that we were heading in and kind of allowed us to evolve in the direction that we're in now. Now, I'll also say, as I mentioned, I've had two different stints at Cedar Ridge, both different from one another. In between those two, I actually left Cedar Ridge for a little while to work in Denver, Colorado at a beautiful distillery called Stranahan's Colorado Whiskey. Now, I keep saying that the two stints are different from one another, and I should mention that I was different from myself in stint 1 and 2. In stint 1, from 2005 to 2010, I was with Cedar Ridge really as a kid. I mean, I was in high school and college. I was there to help out on nights and weekends, make a little extra money, help the family business. But as time went on, I really did start to get interested in this stuff, and I wanted to fully immerse myself in it. I wanted to learn more, and that's why I eventually went out to Stranahan's. When I got there, I learned so much. I mean, from not just from the company, but from the people that I was with. I had the honor of working under Rob Dietrich, who is one of the best in the business. I kind of consider him my mentor. And I just learned a ton about this business. And that's essentially where I decided that I want to make a lifelong career out of this. I want to be in it for the long haul. And eventually in 2014, headed back to Cedar Ridge in more of a director role now, kind of helping to steer the company into whiskey. We have always done a lot of things at Cedar Ridge. We're still to this day a winery distillery combination. We still produce a little bit of brandy, vodka, rum, gin, you name it. We make it, but we have a focus now, and that is whiskey. And that is something that had a lot of my involvement. When I was in Colorado at Stranahan's, I was exposed to this whiskey boom that was happening and seeing people camp out on alleyways to get special release whiskeys and to want to support their look. Yeah, same here. Want to
that line.
Yeah. So what I saw there was just so important. And I was like, hey, we can do something very similar in the state of Iowa. Iowans are very loyal. If we put out a good product, they will support that. And one thing led to another, and that's where we are today. So like I said, fairly sizable distillery, but we came from something that was extremely small. And yeah, can't imagine doing anything else at this point in my career.
I have to ask, I gotta ask, what caused the Great Iowa Winery Explosion?
Not
what pops to mind, right?
You mean like the boom to open up wineries in the state of Iowa?
Yeah.
It was really weird. And I don't know exactly what caused it, but in the early 2000s, a lot of them started popping up here. And I think it was some data that we had like Prohibition era data. Iowa was like the number 8 grape growing state in the United States, which meant that we could obviously produce grapes here of a certain variety. And so I think people started seeing that and wanted to plant more vineyards, and then vineyards lead to wineries. I mean, that's essentially how my family got into it too. Back in 2005, we had acquired the land in 2002 to plant vines out here. And one thing kind of led to another. If you're going to have a vineyard, you might as well also have a winery. And if you're going to have a winery, you might as well differentiate with a distillery. And we just kind of kept, we might as well. And
you make it sound so inevitable.
We've done it all the way to where we're at right now. And, you'll constantly hear me harp on that without the support of Iowans and their pride in what we do, none of it would have been possible. Like I said, we kind of kept adding just chapter and chapter into our book and adding another piece of equipment here, another piece of equipment there. And every time we took that gamble and made that investment, Iowans were right here to support. And so we are always in debt to what they've done for us as a business. That's for sure.
So let's unpack that a bit, if I may. Right. So I truly believe, right, everything starts from raw materials. If we're talking, right, grain to glass, grape to glass.
Yep.
I'm super interested in learning more about the farming operation and grape versus grain. Like, let's talk about that. What are you growing? You mentioned some cultivars on the grape side of things.
Yep.
What are what varietals are you growing on the grain side of things? And let's look into that.
Yeah, and we might have to go back and forth on it a little bit because it is a lot, and I'll certainly leave things out if I try to just ramble on about it all. But I will say that even longer than my family's been in the booze business, if you will, we've been in the ag business. For honestly, as far back as we can trace. Way before our families were here, over in Germany, we were in ag. We've been in ag forever. And what we grow at Cedar Ridge is entirely grapes. I will break that down a little bit further in a second here. But we also have a family element of corn farm, farms that grow corn and soybeans. If you're in the state of Iowa, you grow both. So Cedar Ridge itself, we actually don't grow the corn here. My family grows corn in Winthrop, Iowa, and that we purchase all of our corn from Winthrop, Iowa. So that's kind of how our corn business goes versus grapes. So it's really confusing to people. And one of the best ways to understand it is to actually come out here and see it for yourself, and it'll make a lot more sense. But truly what we are growing here is grapes. Our distillery is surrounded by 12 acres of grapevines. And then if you travel to Winthrop, Iowa, our family farms, we have somewhere between 800 and 1,000 acres out in Winthrop, Iowa, growing corn. That's where you'll see our corn operation. So it is a little bit spread out and it is a little bit separated, but my family has been involved in both since the beginning of time. That's for sure.
That's awesome. So you mentioned corn, you mentioned grapes. Any other?
Yeah. So as far as the materials go, no, that really is it. So one thing that we're absolutely dedicated to doing is in our whiskey, all the corn that we're going to mash is going to come from the state of Iowa. We're very dedicated to that. We get it all from Winthrop, Iowa, as of right now. And prior to that, at one point, we were getting literally 100% from the family farm, which is eventually we'd like to end up back on a system like that. We reached the point in our business life cycle, if you will, where logistically it was getting very difficult to do that year round,
Right.
to get it all from one particular field year round. So what we've done is now all of our family farm corn goes to the Winthrop elevator in Winthrop, Iowa, and that's where we purchase from. Eventually, it would be nice to get a series of family farms that everything's coming from those again, because that was a really exciting part of our business, and I would like to get back to that. Getting onto other grains, whether it's rye, malted barley, the three grains that we typically work with here are corn, malted rye, and malted barley. And we bring those in from out of state. As a matter of fact, some of that is even going to come from Saskatchewan. I've had the opportunity to meet with our maltster up in Bigger, Saskatchewan, called Prairie Malt Facility. I'm a huge fan of their work. They do an excellent job for us. And at this point, I can't really imagine partnering up with anyone else. So we get all of our malted grains from that facility, and they ship it here to ours. So we bring everything a truckload at a time, and those three grains. Now, if we do kind of work outside the box, every now and then we'll bring in some malted winter white wheat. We'll bring in some cool peated malts. We'll source those elsewhere. But our corn's all the state of Iowa. Our barley and rye come from Prairie Malting Facility, and then everything else we kind of look around for.
That peated malt is tasting great, by the way.
Hey, thank you. That peated malt
was an eye opening. I like that.
It's a ton of fun, and I know that we'll eventually kind of get into our whiskey range, and that's something I really like to talk about, because when you think Iowa, I guess I don't know what anyone thinks. I'd love to hear that, but when you think Iowa, I'm sure you're not thinking single malt, and that has been a challenge, but also something that's very fun to wow people with. Is that, in my opinion, one of the best things that we put out is actually our single malt here. And we do produce a really good peated malt in our single malt line, and I'm really excited about that category in general. So I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit deeper as we move on.
Awesome. So I still wanted to dig in a little bit around, farm, because I can't help myself.
Hey, I hear you.
So in terms of the corn you're growing, right? Assuming it's just yellow dent number 2.
Yep, it is.
Okay. Crop rotation.
Crop rotation. So here in the state of Iowa, like I said, pretty much, I don't quote me on this, but about 99% of what's going to be grown here is corn and soybeans. So if you have, say you only have 2 fields, which most people are going to have more than that, but in year 1, the one over here is going to be corn, the one over here is going to be soybeans, and in year 2, you're going to flip-flop them. So crop rotations in order to basically regenerate nutrients in the soil and not to overpull nutrients out of that soil and damage the earth. So obviously there's a whole lot that needs to be done there in general to improve practices, in my opinion. But that is how we do it in the state of Iowa. We do crop rotations. 1 year soybeans, the next year is corn, and you just keep going back and forth.
Which is awesome. And I think a lot of people don't realize what goes into the product they're sipping. And again, I know I've said this a million times, but whiskey is awesome because it is rooted in agriculture. And if you didn't think that was a pun, I'm full of puns from people who know me or who've interviewed me. And it is important because we all need to be stewards of the land, whether or not we're making wine or we're making, I don't know,
rum
out of cotton. You know what I mean? So I think that's super cool. Again, we chatted about this. I obviously grew up in the Midwest, and here at our farm, in Vermont, we try to be stewards of land, and I think that's important. So kudos to you guys.
Hey, thank you very much. It's a really important part to our business. It's obviously, farming in general is a really important element to our state. And, I can say that if I wasn't doing this, I would probably be a farmer. My grandpa Melvin farmed his entire life. He's still kicking it, and he's he's all about farming, and he was a very influential person to me. He's my hero. And if I was going to be doing anything else, it would be that. I have the utmost respect for farmers, and without them, we wouldn't have beautiful whiskey. I can tell you that much. So thanks to all the farmers out there.
Yeah. Can we just?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know I only have water, and I know that's bad, but
that's okay.
Farmers.
I'll drink extra for you.
Thank
I'll
you.
just go straight from this mini bottle here.
I do have a no farms, no beer sticker on the car, so I'm in.
Okay. I didn't introduce.
That should be a much bigger thing. Yeah.
Homegrown.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice.
There you go.
On the back,
Very nice.
it says no farm, no beer. So yeah.
Cool.
I love it. I
wore that in honor of you today, even though it's beer, but it's I think this.
Hey, they go hand in hand. Without farms, we wouldn't have either. There'd be a lot missing without farms, and many of those are the things that we'd enjoy. So yeah, it's tough to keep that in mind, especially when you're not located in the Midwest and you're not really familiar with ag. I mean, it's easy to overlook the importance of that, and I definitely have a lot of pride in being from this region and being from a family of farmers that have been able to help contribute to that. I mean, a lot of people don't think about where things like this come from, and I have a lot of pride in the fact that my family has helped pull that all together.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Liz already brought up, this is number 2 Yellow Dent, which we've had some guests on the show who kind of look down their nose at that. They're this strain or this heritage strain or this hybrid. Most of the bourbon in the world, let alone Iowa or anywhere else, is made with number 2 Yellow Dent. So is it that it's not really important which corn you're using, which I don't believe, but is it just that there are a multiplicity of factors that go into how bourbon is made and how bourbon tastes? So, I mean, you could definitely make good bourbon I'm drinking good bourbon made with number 2 Yellow Dent. So I just wanted to hammer on that and see what you had to say about it.
It's a great question. And I really appreciate that question because not a lot of people ask it. And I do think it's an important one. I would generally say, yes, it definitely matters what kind of corn you used. I mean, when you're making whiskey, I mean, it's very similar to baking something in your kitchen. Of course, the ingredients matter. I mean, because they're the base of the product that you're creating. So, there's some really distilleries out there doing some really cool things with corn. I mean, there's some blue corn being used. There's all sorts of different varieties, and I'm really excited and optimistic about what that might do to the whiskey landscape. I'm especially excited.
Purple, yep.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, you can go on forever, and I'm especially excited about the content that can create for the consumers to then kind of geek out about that and really study it and learn more about the category in general. That's what I'm all about, is exploring a range and creating a range in whiskey that people can then go explore. I really like that concept. So anyway, yes, I think there's some really cool things you can do with different grains. Here we are dedicated at Cedar Ridge to using yellow number 2 Dent. I mean, that's what we're always going to use because that is the crop that comes from Iowa. And we're very enamored with creating this Iowa whiskey from the state of Iowa to give the state of Iowa some recognition in the Midwest in general. And that's the crop that we use here. So that's what we want to stay true to. And we probably won't move away from it. Lastly, I'll say is, like I said, it can be very cool what corn or what grain in general you're utilizing and kind of experimenting with different ones. But there are a number of different things that go into making a quality whiskey. And a lot of people will fixate on just one or two of those things. Age is something that people really, really obsess over. And age is an important part of a whiskey. A lot of people obsess over mash bills, and mash bills are an important element of whiskey, but they're both one of 20, 30, 40 different things that can make a cool whiskey. I mean, there's yeast strains, there's the climate that you age in, there's the type of barrels, the char level.
There are write a book about it.
Exactly. Which, by the way, which by the way I have. I have.
Oh,
Yeah, I
thank
have.
you.
That's a great book. And anyway, there are so many different things that you can do to make a cool whiskey, and I am all for people experimenting. All different variances and varieties, whether it's grain, whether it's barrels, whether it's mash bills. Get out there and try
Right.
something new, because that's what makes this category cool.
Yeah,
Is that
tweak that stuff.
we've been doing it for thousands of years, and there is no one way to do this. We have not found the perfect way to do this, and therefore that probably means that there is no perfect way. So get out there and look for variants and explore the categories.
Yeah, but that's the trick, right? Is that there's no one singular way.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I love, is that I mean, even when we, and I'm Liz, I'm sure that you're very familiar with this, but even when we use the same distillate from the same mash, the same char level, aged right next to each other in our warehouse, 2 barrels, they will taste completely different from one another. So I mean, no matter how many variances you look for, or try to eliminate, even you're gonna have different product. It's one of the most fascinating parts about this, and so I try to embrace it. I try to welcome it, and I say definitely explore with different grains, definitely explore with different malts, and get out there and see what you can come up with.
So just parroting that back, because I teed up the conversation with terroir, and again, if terroir is the correct way to communicate, or if that's the correct terminology, I don't know. I don't have a better term for it. Maybe there's brighter people out there, like writers.
Yeah, this writer has nothing better either.
I always say terroir. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, because terroir is for whiskey, and in my opinion, not only just the land, not just where it's throughout the whole process, throughout the continuum.
Process and people. I think the people are part of it too.
People are
that is exactly right, and that's our brand promise is all about product, place, and people. Very, very similar to what you just said. That's what we're all about here, and yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
So we talked about the farm. We talked wine a little bit. Are there overlaps?
Oh man, absolutely. I mean, there's a significant amount of overlaps, and that's something that we always want to have here. It's kind of our Cedar Ridge way. So I mentioned that when we started out, our business plan was to be a winery that differentiates by also being a distillery. Well, now, I mean, that has really flip-flopped. To give you a sense of scale, we have an awesome wine operation. Our winemaker is a guy named Tim Hafel. He's very talented and does really good stuff for our company. He basically is Cedar Ridge Winery, and he produces about 20,000 gallons of the highest quality wine that we can make, and we sell it in just a few counties in the state of Iowa. So it is a fairly small wine operation. Our whiskey operation, we distribute to about 30 states. We're primarily focused in the Midwest, which I want to talk a lot more about in a second. But so and we distribute to about 5 different countries. So we have a fairly sizable whiskey distillery, fairly small winery business. But what we're trying to do is create a lot of crossover, and we're trying to influence one with the other, because we will always produce wine here. We will always make whiskey here. So you might as well use that as an advantage, because there are so few winery distillery combinations. It's much more likely to see a beer and whiskey combination. So that's what we're trying to do. And so we do all sorts of bourbon barrel aged red wine. We do when we get into single malt, that's where I really geek out about it, is we have all these awesome wine barrels that we can utilize to finish our whiskeys in. And I by background, I'm a single malt guy who works at a bourbon distillery. So I really like finishing my single malts in these awesome X wine casks that we have. So, when our winemaker Tim is done with we make some American port here. When he's done with those barrels, white wine, red wine, we've even done some white port. I can utilize all those barrels for our finishing process. So we get a lot of barrel sharing advantages going on. And one major advantage there is that we get those barrels fresh. I also bring in a lot of barrels from around the country. It's one of my favorite jobs, and out of the country even, is sourcing these barrels. It's really exciting. But a lot of times when they get to us, they're still great barrels. They're still functional, but they're getting fairly dry at that point in time.
Yeah.
And we we try to structure it, and it's pretty complicated to do because we're very busy around here, but we try to structure anytime we're emptying wine casks that later that day or early the next morning, we can actually refill them with the spirit that we want to put in them. That way we get the advantage of being a winery distillery. If we don't do it quick, we lose that advantage, and then it it's just wasted. So we do a lot of fresh fill barrel transfers, and that's always fun, whether we're going from wine to whiskey or whiskey to wine.
So can we jump right over? Because I'm just devilishly curious now. This, as I mentioned, and we talked, the quintessential, the signature blend, the American single malt, which I'm just loving this whiskey. So what kind of barrels is that finished in?
Oh man, buckle up because this is a tough one. It's a long one, but
right.
So our quintessential single malt, which by the way, I should touch on the name because that's always a thing. But like I mentioned, I'm an American single malt whiskey guy by background. I really cut my teeth at Stranahan's in the world of whiskey. I had a little experience prior to that, but that's where I really fell in love with whiskey, was at Stranahan's. Meanwhile, my dad, who started Cedar Ridge, he has always been a big Scotch guy. So the two of us together have always loved single malt. I'm more of an American single malt guy, and he's more of a single malt Scotch guy. And the quintessential is where those two worlds have met at Cedar Ridge.
It's like straddling pretty well there, man.
Exactly. So we wanted to create something together that kind of satisfies both those itches. And what was suggested for the name was the quintessential. Our team of directors, which obviously we're both on, the team of directors presented that idea, and I will say at the beginning, both my dad and I absolutely hated it. We did not want that to be the name. But eventually, people kind of chimed in why that is important and why that would be valuable, and eventually we've all kind of embraced it, and now we really enjoyed the name. But so yes, the quintessential is a play on words. It is an essential whiskey to our business. It obviously comes from the last name Quint, and anyway, that addresses the name. But getting into what the product is, it's very complex. So all of our single malt, we age it all. We start the aging process in ex-bourbon barrels. In the regulations for at least proposed regulations for American single malt whiskey, you can utilize either new or used barrels, and we are utilizing used barrels to start off the process. So we're using ex-bourbon barrels for about the first 3 years. Then what we do is we pull all
your ex. Or
yes, correct. Yep, our own ex barrels. Excuse me. We have at times needed additional bourbon barrels, and we have brought in used bourbon barrels from elsewhere, but 99.9% of the time, it's going to be our own bourbon casks. So yeah, for about the first 3 years, it starts out in those, and it gets them off to a more of a Scotch-like start. Our American single malt is going to be very Scotch-like as designed. Like I mentioned, part of that is my dad's influence. And a lot of Scotch-like single malts are going to start off in used casks. So anyway, after the first 3 years, we will pull those barrels back into our facility, and we'll actually transfer them into a series of unique finishing casks. So this is where my job gets really fun, and I get to bring in barrels from all over the place, including our own winery, sherry butts from Spain, authentic port casks and American port casks, sauterne barrels, you name it. I've aged single malt in it. And so our single malt is now sitting in these finishing casks for another 2 years on average. And then I will pull them in. Okay. We have a 1,000-gallon vat that has single malt in it. I'll taste what's in that, and I'll taste all these unique finishing casks, and I'll decide which should be married into the vat that we have. So it goes from ex-bourbon barrels to unique finishing casks into a vat. We bottle it halfway down and repeat the process. Bottle it halfway down and repeat the process. So it is a vatted malt, a Solera vatted malt. Yep. And so that vat never goes empty. It's always evolving batch by batch, fill by fill. And it's something that's really exciting because people have really, really rallied behind it. For instance, batch 8 and batch 9, they're going to be fairly similar to one another. However, there will be a little evolution between the two because different barrels were added in along the way. So batch 8, maybe has just a touch more of peated malt in it than batch 9, and maybe batch 9 is slightly more sherry forward. However, if you had the two separate, you probably wouldn't know that there's a difference unless you had them together and really look for those minuscule variances. So it's something fun that people can geek out about. They can kind of study batch by batch. or, even if you're not studying batch by batch, it will still be consistent enough that you'll know what it is when you have it. So that is our quintessential American single malt. I'm very bullish about that category in general, and I'm excited that we're positioned well to compete within that category as it continues to evolve.
Yeah. Just a short plug for something a hobby horse of mine, side-by-side tasting. There's a lot to be said for blind tasting. There's a hell of a lot to be said for wide open eye tasting too, I think. Knowing what you're tasting so you can get at it.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'm really glad you said that. Blind tasting is a ton of fun. I love doing it. My friends and I, we do it all the time. But having a bunch, setting the glass in front of the label so you can try it and come back to it, try something else and come back to it, and just keep comparing. That's a ton of fun. Like when I go to a whiskey bar, like a true whiskey bar where that's what they're doing is whiskey. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to actually order about 3 different drams and see if they'll even leave the bottles right in front of me so that I can just keep revisiting them and studying them. And it's very eye-opening. It's a good way to educate your palate a little bit.
Yeah, I think you learn a lot that way, especially if one of them is one you're really familiar with, and then you start working the other ones with. I just think it's a really useful tool. And again, it's like, you get a whiskey drinker will get fixated on one part of the whiskey, the mash bill or the barrel or the yeast or whatever. I think this kind of tasting, they finally come around and realized blind tasting, and now that's all they want to do. I'm like, just do everything.
Exactly.
Do everything all the time.
Explore it all, try it all. That is, and people are starting to figure this out. Whiskey is very similar to the culinary arts. I mean, we've figured out, how to go eat at a restaurant. And that is, you go to a nice restaurant and you're going to try something new on the menu, maybe something that you're not super familiar with. And the chef who makes it is going to put a lot of passion behind it.
Yeah.
And, and the meal's going to taste different every time. It's not like, you're going to get even if you order the same meal today that you order on Tuesday, it's probably going to be slightly tweaked. I mean, a whiskey is very, very similar to that. And I think the more that people start to understand that, the more they will do what we're talking about, where they kind of explore the category, both blind and not blind. I mean, and just really, really dive into it a little bit deeper.
Wow. So I'm just going to circle back here because what you said about chef's table or whatnot.
Yeah.
And I can't move on without saying, again, it's seasonal ingredients, right?
Yeah.
So back to farm. Okay. I'll move on.
I'll talk about farming all day.
Yeah. So will she, believe me.
So we talked about that. Let's talk about your site a little bit more, moving into the actual distillery, what your processing setup is, and maybe dig into some of your other core range.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a slightly different setup here than most, but I guess pretty much every distillery at this point has a slightly different setup, and that's kind of what makes us all so beautiful. But we're a rural distillery out here in Swisher, Iowa, and there are major advantages to being either a rural distillery or an urban distillery. There are several pros and cons to both. One pro out here is that we have plenty of land to expand and explore on and develop things on. A con is that we're not on things like city sewer, which you wouldn't realize how big of an advantage that is to being on city sewer. When you're distilling and stuff, there's a lot of wastewater and stuff like that, and you have to figure out where it all goes. And so there are a number of city distilleries and rural distilleries now, and they all have different setups and designs, and that does kind of tie into why we have things a certain way out here. But so let's get into our kind of the mashing process of it all. We have obviously, a standard mash tun. We used to have a mash lauter tun, and all of our whiskey, including bourbon, was lautered, and still to this day, it pretty much is. It's just a slightly different setup. It is a very, very unique setup to I don't want to just skip over that one because that is pretty important. It is a very unique
feel better about
setup.
wearing that shirt now, don't you, Liz? That's a very beery thing, man.
It is extremely beery.
Homegrown.
So, in the world of loudering whiskeys, I mean, in single malts, that's far more common than it is in
I
bourbon.
literally am stuck on this. I'm sorry. It's offline, but you continue.
Yeah. So we basically do our fermentation and distillation off grain because we have separated the liquids from the grain in the mashing process. When it's exiting our mash tun, instead of using a traditional lauter tun now, we actually go to a mash filtration system, which is essentially a lauter tun that is going to be a little bit more efficient. It's gonna.
You're not talking about an actual mash filter, though.
I think
like a mash filter. Yes, mash filtration system.
Wow, nice.
Okay. That's something that we have moved over to over the last year. So we did that in July of last year. Is when we added that, and it's allowed us to mash, get more mashes in a day, essentially the same way that we were doing it, and it was all off grain anyway because we had been lautering. So a mash filtration system is also just off grain. And we're going to extract more of the liquid and more of those fermentable sugars out of our mash. In addition to that, another pro it's going to give us is that we are going to have dry grain coming out of the process, which is very important in a rural distillery because we can't let that wet grain get into our septic. We can't let that wet grain sit around our property because it's going to stink the place up, and we have weddings and 100,000 visitors come through here a year. So, if we have wet grain, it's going to be a problem. And so this mash filtration system was the way for us to eliminate that. We separate our grains from liquids early in the process. We give our dry grains to a local farmer to feed cattle, and we ferment just the liquids. Now, what it's also giving us, or I should say, we've talked about how there's a million ways to make a whiskey. I mean, one thing that it is contributing to is when you try Cedar Ridge, at what we're going for, whether it's 86 proof or 120 proof, what we're always going for is an easy sipping and approachable whiskey. So one thing that is going to contribute to that that off-grain process is that it is going to be a little bit softer of a flavor profile, even at cask strength. It's not going to be quite as bold as an on-grain fermentation. And so that is what we're doing from the very beginning of the process. And I'm sure we'll come back to that, but let me hop on the stills here. So we go from the mash filtration system to our fermenters. We do about a 5-day fermentation, and then we flip those over. We have an 800-gallon alpha still, which is from Carl. It is a traditional swan neck still. We work with Carl out of Germany because that's where our family history is over in Germany. We thought that would be an interesting touch. And then we have a 200-gallon finishing still from Carl as well. Same style setup, just 1/4 the size. And those are the two stills that we're using around the clock here. So yeah, we go from mash tun to mash filtration system, 5-day fermentation, and then take our alpha and finishing distillate. And then we go to barrel entry at 120 proof. As of right now, I'm going to start experimenting a little bit more with entry proof in 2023. As of right now, we always go 120, and we use char number 3. So exclusively. Yeah.
Char 3. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
Sorry. Let's unpack. So you're not in batch rectifiers at all. You're just in a stripping pot and a finishing pot.
Correct. Yep. We do exclusively pot stills as of right now. We've talked about down the road, if we ever really try to double down again, and we're kind of at a point where we need to make that decision here soon. If we really want to double down our production operations again, we might do a continuous column and then finish in a pot. We haven't really decided that. Personally, just because my background working here and at Stranahan's, I've always been really interested in pot stills from beginning to end. So that's something that I would particularly enjoy, but we wouldn't rule out a continuous column for the beginning for the alpha. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. To strip. Okay. Got it.
But you're running with 2 stills right now, 2 pots.
That's correct. Yep. And
okay.
We do have a couple more that we use for pretty much everything else we produce, but around the clock we're running 2 stills here, 2 different pot stills. One's roughly an 800-gallon that's converted from liters, and the other's roughly a 200-gallon pot still from Carl. Yeah, formerly Christian Carl.
So you could just scale that up.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. And where it gets so complex is that's what we have done in the past. We basically play musical stills. Is that every time we double down, we just get a bigger alpha still and then make the old alpha still the finishing still, and you just keep pushing everything down
Gotcha.
the line.
Yeah,
But
I'm familiar with
you
that.
gotta what's that? You're
Familiar with that.
yeah, it's super fun. But when we have limited facility space. I mentioned we have ground out here that we can operate on, but in the facilities that we're currently in, which are already very set up and structured to our normal operations, it would be quite difficult for us to also bring in a new, bigger alpha still. And to give you a little supporting evidence on that, the last alpha still that we brought in, the one that we are currently using, we had a little mismeasurement issue and had to put a very expensive hole in the ground so that would actually fit without the swan neck hitting the roof. So yeah, so if our roof's right here, our swan neck's about right here, because we had to put a hole in the ground to even fit it in the room. So if we wanted to do that again, we probably can't just get a bigger alpha still.
Yeah.
We might need to consider some sort of a column system. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
And utilities, right? That's
utilities are fun. Yeah.
another consideration. Steam,
That is
cooling
that.
water. Yeah.
There's so much there, and that's so here. I'm the head distiller, and I'm also the director of operations. In those. We have lumped those here into one position. I'm pretty sure that's
so you can
like
have
probably
arguments with yourself.
yeah. I want to make whiskey all day. I need to worry about like utilities and things like that. It can be very problematic. Long term, I think those might be 2 or 3 different positions, but I guess that's neither here nor there right now. But yeah, people don't realize how much work there is in running a distillery aside from thinking about mash bills and yeast and all that jazz. From literally just the logistics of getting water from point A to point B, getting rid of water, grain needs to come in, but if we want to expand, we need to hold twice as much grain. So where's all that going to go? There's a lot.
Patterns and silos.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. The flow charts. The process, the flow of the process is very difficult. And so, in theory, a lot of times it can be as simple as, we need to double our production. So let's bring in this one piece of equipment. But it's like, well, we also need space for that equipment. In order to do that, we need to move these things. In order to move those, we need a new plumber. And, it can be very complex and difficult. And at this point, yeah. And so one thing that is very interesting about our business out here, I mentioned when we opened up in 2005, we were a literal garage distillery, but now Cedar Ridge, we're basically on a farm out in Swisher, Iowa, and we built buildings as big as we could when we could do it because we're a privately owned company. And so we invest in things when we can make the investment, not necessarily when we want to make the investment. And so that has created kind of a weird, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory setup where it doesn't always make sense for, this piece to be here and that piece to be over there. But when we expanded, that's where the piece could fit, and this one could fit over here.
That's where
and so that's where it is. And no, would it be more efficient if these 2 pieces of equipment were right next to each other? Absolutely, that'd make a ton of sense. But things are hard piped in now, and there's not necessarily any going back. So I think if a day did come where we really, really wanted to double down again or quadruple down or whatever, we might need to talk about a facility that is partially offsite or something like that we could build from scratch and then bring like everything here to age, or, we haven't really worked out what those details would be because it's all just kind of fantasy right now. But what I'm saying is, even though we have land and we have plenty of opportunity, it's not always as easy as just kind of, making it happen. There's a lot that we'd have to consider if we really wanted to make this thing bigger. We're kind of maxed out with our current setup, which is an exciting point to be at.
It is exciting. I definitely agree, and you brought up a lot of good points. In the spirit of keeping kind of on task, and I know we're running up on time, which honestly, if I could ignore my clock right now and just keep deep diving into this deep well of knowledge, I will keep sipping. That was a pun.
Oh yeah. Nice connection there. Very good.
Nail it.
I wanted to talk to you about Sir Maple, but also I wanted to talk to you about Slipknot because I on your post, Lou, I actually got ready, got in the mood for the show today, listening to Slipknot.
You mentioned, yes.
As one does. What's that about? What's going on there?
It's a lot. So Slipknot, we do a collaboration with the band Slipknot. Obviously, the product is called Number 9. So there's Number 9 Small Batch and Number 9 Reserve, and both are made in collaboration with Cedar Ridge and Slipknot. So this one started about 3 years ago now. Their manager actually reached out to us, just kind of a friendly Iowan email. Hey, the band and I have been talking about, getting into the world of whiskey. It's something that we're really passionate about and excited about. They had, I think, realized how much science and hands-on work there is behind the scenes, and they were just really intrigued by it. So they wanted to sit down with us and just learn more about an opportunity. And that one meeting kind of turned into another, and both parties started to get really interested in it. And then one day, Clown is the head of the band. His real name is Sean, but goes by Clown. I never know how I'm supposed to introduce him, by the way. Should I call him Clown? Should I call him? It's a bit of a
Clown. Like, what do we?
Yeah. It's a bit of the thing, but he's one of the coolest, nicest people I've ever met. And side note on that, when they were coming out for their first meeting, I was super intimidated because I had only seen these guys on stage before, and on stage they're fairly aggressive. They all wear masks and they just go bananas for like 2 hours on stage. And I was like, what are these people going to be like in like a sit down business meeting? So it was really, really interesting, and they're all so friendly and nice. And anyway, one day, Clown and I, we went through our barrel sheds and we opened up a bunch of barrels and tasted through them all together. We did different blends and different proofs, and that's when we realized that there is something here, and decided to get into kind of product development mode. So one thing on that is that the band truly is very involved with all that. I helped put my expertise into the process, but Clown himself, I'm assuming with the help of the other band members, they came up with a blend of 60% bourbon, 40% rye. They came up with the proofs of the two different whiskeys. They were very involved in the label design. They wanted to be very hands-on with all that. So it's very much not like hey, Cedar Ridge, make us a Slipknot whiskey. They truly are very involved with it, and that's something that I'm truly excited about. Every now and then, Clown will pop out here and we'll have creative meetings, and it's so fun to just sit in those meetings and listen to his brain work out loud, because he's a true artist, and artists, their minds, they work very differently from everyone else. You'll talk about, we'll start a conversation talking about whiskey, and like 10 minutes later, we'll be talking about like black holes and just stuff that's way out there. And we just let him run, because like gold will just appear. He's so creative. But anyway, that's what we have going with the band Slipknot. They're just super passionate about anything that they can be, be hands-on with, anything that can be scientific with. And that's how we got in whiskey with them. And the rest is history. It's been a ton of fun.
Wow.
So I have follow-up questions.
Yeah.
As I do. All right. My first question is proof. Like, how did they land on the proof? Was that some significance of being higher proof because we're a metal band? Like, we're in
a little weird about proof on here.
Yeah,
absolutely. Hey, and I love talking about proof. So we can definitely harp on that. Also, I see Mark Schilling said he's waving.
Yes.
But
we got you, Mark. We got you.
Love
for you.
But anyway, proof. How that kind of started is, when, like I said, Clown and I, we were tasting through a bunch of different barrels at different proofs. We kind of found some sweet spot ranges. General ranges. And then in addition to like finding and dialing in on those proof ranges that we were going to release this at, excuse me, Clown is big on, and Slipknot in general, they're big on the number 9. Their band has 8 members, and they always talk about how the 9th member is the audience, the fan. That they're truly, it's more than just a band. It's like a community, and number 9 represents that community. So, fortunately, the range that we had kind of dialed in on for the whiskeys we were going to release, both 90 proof and 99 kind of fit into those pretty well. And so Clown thought it would be a nice touch to release them at those proofs. So you've got small batch number 9, which is at 90 proof. And then you've got number 9 reserve, which is at 99 proof. And we wanted it to be a little bit more up there than traditional Cedar Ridges. I mean, the product that we have made a name for ourselves at Cedar Ridge is our straight bourbon, which is 86 proof. It's the number 1 seller in Iowa, but it is kind of a low proof bourbon, and the industry has definitely trended towards higher proof stuff. And so we wanted to offer something that was at least a little bit higher proof. Hey, I'm also kind of a proof nut, and I would love to talk about that a little bit too. But that's how we landed on the 90 and 99. Was it fit those ranges? Cool. It also had a nice kind of marketing element to it, and represented the fans nicely.
Cool.
Okay, so my second follow-up question. I don't know how we only have 2 minutes left.
I know.
So of course, I'm a big safety nut.
Yeah.
PPE. So are they coming out in these meetings and they're crawling around the warehouses? Are they in costume? Are they in costume? Are they wearing PPE? Tell me everything.
Good question.
That makes some good pictures.
Not in costume. However, I mean, we've done plenty of promotional stuff here, like bottle signings and stuff.
Of course.
Where they do go all out. They don't half-ass it. I mean, they go all out. But no, when they're here and we're truly doing like R&D and stuff, they are in normal human form. I mean, they are truly really nice people. Dressed just like me, and we're just two people having fun. PPE. I mean, we got to wear the proper safety precautions and stuff like that. I will say, when we're moving barrels and stuff, I have a strict do not touch the barrels if you're from Slipknot policy. Because the last thing I want is want them to smash their hands between barrels or something crazy, or get a steel sliver, which happens all the time.
I'm just imagining Clown in like some Duluth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a jeans guy. He'll wear jeans. Definitely just dress like Iowans, being Iowans, picking out Iowan whiskey. But I make sure that they're not getting too risky, because that is something that is always a concern. If like they're in the middle of a tour and they take a break and pop out here, is like if something happened where they got hurt or something, that would be ridiculous. So I make sure they're not the ones, moving barrels around or anything like that. They're just 100%. They're sampling the whiskey and trying different blends and stuff like that. Yeah.
Are they from Iowa? Like, what's
a lot of them are. Clown himself, he actually lives out near the Des Moines area. Clown is definitely from the state of Iowa. The band, they originated in the state of Iowa, and that's why they have such a following here. I mean, I remember from elementary school to middle school, like that was all anyone talked about, and still to this day, obviously. But that was when I first learned of them, was at a very young age, because they're this Iowa band making waves, and that's it's not every day that our state is represented. So it's always something that's really exciting to see, is when an Iowa band is at the top of the charts or anything like that. So we had a lot of pride in them from the beginning.
That's awesome. So full circle. Kicked us off saying, West Coast, best coast, but when Midwest is just the best.
Absolutely.
So, that's all I got. Lou, what you got before we wind things down here?
I don't have anything. We really got to wind up. I hate to do that. This is, you know what, dude? The first time I looked at my watch was 1:30. and I mean, it's usually like 1:15. Oh, shit, 1:20. This has been a great ride. Thank you.
It's
been a ton of fun. Thanks again for the opportunity to be with you. And congratulations on kind of wrapping up the series. Honored to have been involved with it, and major congratulations there. Real quick, one quick plug. I mean, for anyone looking for our product, we're mainly distributed throughout the Midwest. That's what we're really trying to push, is Iowa and the surrounding states. So we have a pretty strong shelf presence throughout the Midwest. Keep an eye out for anyone looking to purchase our product that we don't distribute to. CedarRidgeWhiskey.com. You can check it out, and then Cedar Ridge, Iowa.
Green rectangle at the bottom of your screen. Check it out. Click it.
Punch right in.
Of course. And then lastly, I'll say, Cedar Ridge, Iowa is our handle on most social media. On Instagram, if you want to kind of get a behind the scenes view of what I get to do every day, I keep a pretty up to date Instagram. So just check Murphy Quint and see what we've got going at Cedar Ridge.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being our caboose.
I'm honored, and congratulations again, you guys.
Again, thank you everyone for hopping on today. Please come back and join us next Tuesday
week.
for our final episode. Marty Duffy will be joining us, and
it'll be like he never left. I'm sure
it'll be like never left. We'll be doing a nice little review of our time together and opining on what the future of whiskey is going to be like. So check us out again. Murphy, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Cheers.
Couple of years.
Everybody. Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Yeah,
Thanks.
We'll save the tears for next week.
Yeah, we will.
Bye, Murphy. Thanks.
Thank you so much.